everyone, welcome to my studio. This month we're working with a tonal palette, which means most of the colors in our painting will be to the gray side, and there won't be areas with sharp contrast or harsh lines. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing an edited version of the video. The full version, along with the reference photo and lots of other tutorials, are on my Patreon page. You can become a patron for only $5 a month. The link is in the description. Now let's head over to the easel and get dusty. All right, so I am set up to start on this painting. Now, just a little bit about kind of the goal of this. So this lesson that we're doing is on creating a tonal painting. And tonality is really about having more of the colors from the color wheel that are on the gray or more neutral side of the spectrum. There's not a ton of contrast, not a ton of bright, vivid colors. So the photo that I chose, it does have contrast, obviously. We've got the really dark birds. We have the bright patch of light in the sky that's being reflected in the water. But generally speaking, most of the photo and most of the painting are going to be in the midtones. And then as for our palette, we want to make sure that we're choosing colors that are heavy on the gray side. This is the palette that I'm starting with. Now, this doesn't mean I'm not going to add an extra color here or there. But what I'm starting with is more of the neutral blues, just trending a little bit towards the purple. They're a little bit of the warmer blues for our sky and some of the reflections in the water. Obviously, I have the warm yellows and then the more mid-tone yellows. Again, they're all muted, so they're more on the gray side of the color. And then I've got a section of greens. And again, more muted and gray toned greens. So the biggest challenge with this is going to be with our layering, because when we layer pastels, every time you put a layer down, you change the color that you see. So we're going to have an understanding of how the color beneath is going to impact the color we're putting on top and what that optical illusion is going to create for our eyes. So that makes choosing a palette a little more complicated, but we have a good place to start, I think. So the one pastel that wasn't on that palette is my Rembrandt, which I am going to use to put down my underpainting. And this is the most neutral yellow-orange tone that I have, which is not very neutral. It's pretty bright. So we're gonna have to use the rest of our painting to tone this down. But I wanted to get kind of this golden color in, so it will peek through here and there through the painting. So I'm going to start with my darkest tones. Now, this top layer, kind of a reddish purple. I'm not 100% sure how this reddish purple is going to look on top of this orange. It might be too, I think it's a good starting point. So I'm gonna be real careful not to go where my lightest area is. Even though you can put light over dark, which is primarily how we paint with our pastels, we also don't want to fill in too much of the tooth with this level of darkness. It would be quite a challenge to cover that back up. All right, and then I'm going to put this same color down here in the water. Just making sure I get all the way down to my tape line. All right, so now I'm going to come in with my green. So that is mostly this area, kind of the upper part here, a little down here, more of this cool green color. And with blocking in, I'm not spending a lot of time making sure my shapes are perfect. I'm just trying to put them where they need to be, more as representation. All right, so now I'm coming in with this darker, kind of a brownish color. Just getting in that shoreline and then a little bit of our horizon line there. Now obviously we do have birds that'll come in later. I'm not going to put those in right now because they're just going to end up getting blurred and we'll have to fix them. So, all right, so now that I have the darker areas in, I'm just going to take my finger and just kind of lightly blend. All right, so I'm coming in with, this is kind of a, if you just look at it, it looks like a nice yellow, but once it goes on top of this orange, it definitely becomes more neutral looking. I'm just putting this in as kind of the main sky color and into the water. And again, I'm not being super concerned about overlapping my darks that I just put in. I am wiping off the pastel between my strokes because it is picking up the darker colors. I don't want to drag those around. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing, wipe off my finger and just very gently just take off a little bit of this pastel, rub it in just a bit. All right, so we have all of our major shapes blocked in now. So now it's time to start working on refining the shapes a little bit more. So I'm gonna go back up to my top cloud layer. So I have, this is more of a neutral, and it's gonna be a little bit lighter. Not seeing a ton of difference yet, but I'm just softly just moving it around on this purple, letting it kind of fuzz in and out. Now I'm gonna go to a much lighter grayish purple. And this is where we're gonna start to see some details in our clouds, some of the wispies that are hanging down, a little more definition here. And I'm using a very, very light touch. I don't wanna overwhelm. And I'm just gonna gently drag this through. I'm gonna end up covering most of this, but I'm trying to neutralize the yellow just a little bit more. And if you know your color wheel, yellow and purple are opposites and they tend to neutralize each other. So if I rub this in, you'll see now the sky is taken on more of a gray cast. So I'm just going to soften where the yellow and the purple meet. All right, so I'm coming in with a little bit of a more neutral yellow. So this is just a dance back and forth between the different colors that I'm using. I'm going to go even lighter now. I'm reserving this for my very bottom. Just a few little highlights up in the clouds. Keeping in mind that they're reflecting, or you know, where the sun's coming through this darker cloud layer is where these little highlights are going to be. All right, so I'm going to come back in here, just work a little bit more on softening this transition. I'm going to do some horizontal work here with my pastel. Instead of holding it this way, I'm going to hold it this way, which helps me create much more horizontal lines and shapes. And it doesn't obviously take up as much room on the paper because we only have that much room of the purple. So if I held it that way, I'd be covering it up completely. So just gonna pop a little of this. I'm gonna call it a brighter yellow, even though it's not a bright yellow when you see it by itself. But in context with this purple, it definitely does look brighter. All right, and then I'm going to use my little foam blending tool. I'm just kind of gently tapping. I'm not really rubbing, but I'm just softening up some of these sharper lines that I've created. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with this really bright yellow, get my sunspot in here. And we do have some brighter edges kind of right in this area. It's looking good. Now this sunspot's not as bright as I want it to be. So I'm going to come in with white. So this is J. Luda white. It's one of my favorite whites. It's so creamy and it goes on like butter, just to really emphasize right here. Now we'll come back to this top part. I'm going to leave it here for now, let it just kind of simmer a little bit. And if I need to make this brighter, which I think I will, we won't use white. You might be surprised what we'll actually use, but for now I'm going to let that sit. We're going to move down to the bottom half of the painting. So I'm going to work my way from the bottom up and kind of mirror what I did on the top part. So coming back in here with my purple, I don't remember which one that was. They all look the same. Here we go. Okay. So just adding some of this purple down in here. Now in the water, I'm going to introduce a little bit of a grayish blue tone. I want to cool the water down just a little. Normally things that are reflected in water are slightly cooler and a little more neutral than the things that are being reflected. So we're going to want our sky to be just a little cooler in the water than what we see in the actual sky. Now, not quite that cool. It's a little too cool. No worries. Just come back in with our purple, warm it back up again. But putting that blue down gave us just enough coolness to differentiate it from our sky. And I'm going to come back now with my yellows. So I'm going to start with my real neutral brownish yellow. Just kind of reestablish that. Remembering to wipe my pastel off as I go because this is picking up those dark colors. And I'm coming with a little bit warmer, a little lighter. All right, and now I'm gonna blend. Now, if you look at our photo, this top part has some fog. So as we work on the top part of the water and the grasses here, we're gonna want to keep that in mind, that we don't want to have everything in focus. That's another piece of the tonal puzzle, is there's often a lot of atmosphere in these types of works, whether it's a photo or a painting. There's not a ton of detail. It's a lot more about the atmosphere. You'll see a lot of fog, you'll see a lot of clouds, or it'll be maybe dusk where the sun is behind everything, but it's set, so everything is dark. Tonal paintings are a lot of fun. It's very, very unique and different for sure. Okay, so I'm going to come in with my lightest yellow. All right, so just bringing some of the darker areas back in. Too much blending will get rid of your darkness or your details. And we do want to blend, but we don't want to blend our details right out of our painting. So now I'm going to introduce some of our orange tones. This is actually a very, very light orange, but it's warmer than what we have going on so far. So this is going to brighten things up just a touch, and let me get some of these little cloudy details in down here. So as we fill up the tooth, which you can see is starting to happen, I have to press a little bit harder. And eventually I'm going to transition over to softer pastels than what I'm using right now. What I'm using right now are what I would consider more of a medium soft. Started out with the Rembrandt, which was the hardest pastel that I've used so far. Most of the ones I've been using are Jack Richardson, some Mount Vision, and some J. Luda for the most part. But like I said, as the layers fill up here now, I'm gonna start transitioning to more of my Terry Ludwig's and Blue Earth. So I'm gonna put my Sunspot in down here now. All right, then I'm gonna come in with the white just along the edge here, kind of like I did at the top. Just tapping it in just to soften it a tiny bit. All right, so that's good for our water. So we're gonna finish putting in kind of the starter details on the grass, and then that will be it for this first lesson. In the second lesson, we're gonna come back and put in our details, our kind of our higher level details. So, all right. So this is a fairly dark neutral green, and I'm really just making some soft horizontal lines in here to represent our grasses, and then I'm very lightly gonna hit this horizon line here. Now our horizon's not perfectly level. I mean, it's slightly bumpy, but the thing with horizons in a painting like this is if they're perfectly straight, it can look kind of like maybe a worm crawling across the paper. So I'm just gonna add some little trees that are not in the scene, but just wanting to kind of put a little bit of vegetation in here to break up our horizon line a little bit. All right, so this is a lighter version of that very neutral green. I'm just continuing with kind of these more horizontal lines. I'm keeping this more on our shoreline here. This is more of like our dirt. Same thing on this side. Now our shoreline is quite steep, so I'm mimicking that with the way I'm putting my strokes in here. So on this same steep angle, just to try and keep that feeling that it's going downhill. All right, so I'm just gonna come back before we finish up for today with my darker green. Just kind of establish a little bit of a boundary between the grasses and that dirt area. So I'm just using the side of this pastel and doing just kind of an upward flick with it. Just create a little bit of upward movement like the grass would give us. And we will definitely come in our next, in lesson 2, and get that cleaned up a little bit. So, all right, so we're gonna stop here for this lesson. We did have a really good start going with getting everything blocked in and our first few layers of details down. When we come back for lesson 2, we're going to finish with the big details and then get in here with some of the finer details, especially our birds. So I will see you for part 2. Take care.